Hi guys, welcome back to another Average Joe Airsoft instalment. Today we're going to be talking about how to make a ghillie suit. Whether it's the one like I wear during the summer, my green one, or the one that I wear in winter, my brown one, they're all made exactly the same, and this is how we're going to do it. Okay guys, well the first thing we're going to need is going to be something to base our camouflage on. So me personally, I usually want coveralls. They fit me fine, they're a bit loose, they're a bit baggy, so you can wear pouches underneath if you require. Some people like BDUs for example, because you can wear the trousers and then the top separately, so if you wanted to go out kind of tactically on a quick movement, you could just wear the top rather than the trousers. But it all depends what you go with. The ghillie suit that I'm going to show you today, I'm going to cut it down anyway just to make a shroud that sits on my shoulders and over the head, just like the summer one that I was wearing a second ago. So here we go. As I said, coveralls is the first thing that I'm going to use, so let's see what different types of coveralls are out there then. First of all, I'm going to show you the patterned coveralls. I've got 3 sets with me today. I've got DPM, which is the old British dark colours. I've got MTP, which is very well known now in the airsoft world, which is current British Army, and then I've also got the bog standard green British Army, which is what I generally prefer to use. So let's begin with the old DPM colour. So here we are guys, this is the DPM colour. I generally find that this works pretty well during the winter times when you're out in playing airsoft in the UK. Not too sure about other countries, maybe like for America example you might choose a different one like the woodland BDUs or maybe the Marpat or something like those colours. It all depends on what actually suits where you're going. Take into account that what you're going to be wearing is going to cover up your back anyway, so this is only in those situations where you would be showing your front. Okay, so I've showed you through DPM, so now let's go over to MTP. So now this is MTP. This is one colour that I'm not a great fan of because whether it be summer or winter, I really don't feel that MTP fits into a UK environment. It's quite funny considering I'm a serviceman at the moment in the British Army. I really don't think this is a good design. I more or less choose probably the plain green because the plain green works best because you can spray paint it and you can change the colours. So I guess now let's have a look at the green colour. Wait a minute, this ain't green. Let's try that again. Oh good, we're back in green. Okay, so now this is the green pair of coveralls that I'm going to use for this ghillie suit. There's a lot more that you can do with these coveralls, more than the other ones, because the other ones have got pouches all over them, zips all over them. With these you can customise it the way you want. If you get some padding, you can make some knee pads, you can make some arm pads, and as well if you want to waterproof it, you can put parts of tentage on it, glue that on or sew it on however you like. But for the sake of this, today we're going to be making a shroud, so it's going to be half the size of this ghillie suit. It's only going to cover the back, the shoulders and the head. So, okay, let's get into what else you're going to need apart from coveralls. So now that we've picked our coveralls, what we're going to use, we need a net to go on the back of it. This net is British Army camouflage net that I've cut down and I've taken off all of the camouflage material that was on it. You can also use items such as a fishing net, that works pretty well as well. To attach this fishing net onto the back of the suit, we need some shoe goo, as I find that it's a very good waterproofed item that stands up to the robustness and doesn't really rot as much. A lot of people do tend to use fishing line to sew on their net, but I find that quite tedious and the glue is quite easy and sets nicely. I would also recommend buying some Vaseline, mainly because when you do the cap back up, if there's some shoe goo around the cap, it can glue the cap down. So if you put some Vaseline around the cap before sticking it back on, then it does tend to create a barrier, so it's easier to get off next time. So as well as that, the next thing that we are going to require is going to be some sandbag. Now Hessian, you can get this off eBay for anything from a couple of quid upwards, depending on how much you get, depending on how much for your ghillie suit, whether you're going for a big one or you're going for a head and shoulders one, or just trying to make a good decent camouflaged hat out of it. But obviously the colour of this is a little bit off compared to the places where you're going to go, so take into account, go down your local area, have a look around, find out what colours you require, and then the next thing you need is dye. So I've got some dye here which I've picked tropical green and olive green. I've also got some brown as well. but I'm going to be using that at a later date. So basically that is all you need to construct a ghillie suit. Now all this together probably will set you back about £30 to £40. The best thing about that is it's pretty cheap, and you know that it's not going to fall apart unlike some of the ghillie suits that are out on the market nowadays. This is all trying to be on a budget, but at the end of the day you could just start off with a leaf ghillie suit, which generally costs around anything from 18 to 30 quid anyway, which they're manufactured. But if you do want to start your own ghillie suit, this is probably the best way to go. So the next thing that we've got to think about is the dyeing now. So I've got some hot water, I've got some dye. Please read the instructions on the back because all dyes are different. And basically all we're going to do is literally cut it off and empty the dye into our water. Make sure that you've got something to mix it with so it goes into the water nicely, so then when it comes to dyeing our sandbags they should soak up as much as the dye as possible. And then we just throw the sandbag in, get it all in there so it's all submerged. And then we'll come back in about an hour's time. If you need to, just make sure you knead it a little bit to get some of the dye to set in a little bit more. But generally leave it to soak, and we'll come back in about an hour's time.
1 hour later.
So that's about an hour later, so now all we got to do is take out the sandbag. As you can see, it's got a bit of a earthy green to it, which is the colour that we want. So now what we're going to do is take that out, wash it through with a bit of water to get the excess dye off of it, and then let it dry, and then we'll move on to our next step. Now that we've dyed our sandbags, the next thing to do is to cut it into squares of around about anything from 4 to 6 inches really. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start breaking it down to the initial fibres. So what you want to do after you've cut out your square is to start getting the side bits and start fraying them. Little bits like this you don't really want to keep, so discard those bits and only keep the ones when you start getting bigger ones. So those not really going to do a lot, going to discard that. Start fraying it down. Usually I find that two come out at the same time. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. It's quite tedious. As you can see here, we've got 2 strips that have come away, so we're going to put those to the side. They're the ones we're going to be using. Keep on stripping down. Another long one. Keep going all the way. So strip the next one out. Strip the next one. And when you start to get a certain amount of leverage here, the next thing you want to do is start on the sides, so you're actually halving your work, as it's easier to pull out the ones going from side to side rather than just doing one line all the way through. It's a bit of a tedious job, but when they start coming out together you will have a bit of an easier work. It's a little bit harder to begin with, but it does become easier. So keep throwing away, keep throwing away. This is probably the worst part of making a ghillie suit, because this is the kind of thing that you really want to be doing probably when you're watching TV, because as I said, this can take hours and hours and hours, especially if you're making one of the big ghillie suits, such as the one I showed you earlier, the big brown one. If you're only doing a hat or you're doing a shoulder one, yeah, it's not going to be too bad, but you're going to need a fair whack of it. So continue doing that, and then obviously with the other colours make sure you get an equal amount, because we're going to start layering them on the suit in a bit.